August 1st, 1943. Low, overplashed Romania. The B-24 Liberator shudders so hard, the rivets hum like angry bees. Oil refineries below are coughing black fire into the sky, and the whole horizon is flickering orange, like the world is on a burner. Lieutenant Frank Red Kovacs, pilot. 98th Bomb Group can smell gasoline through the oxygen mask. Not a good sign at 200 feet skimming treetops in a 4-engine bomber the size of a barn. "Waist gun report," he yells over the interphone. "Tail's still with us," comes the reply. "But I got holes the size of a fist back here." Lieutenant and I am looking at daylight. The Liberator was never meant to fly this low. It was designed as a high-altitude, long-range heavy bomber. 10 men, 10 50 caliber Brownings, a bomb load heavy enough to punch holes in a city. But today, there is no altitude, no safety. Just smoke flak and German and Romanian 88s firing point blank into the formation. The target is oil, Hitler's oil, specifically the Ploiești refineries that feed the Wehrmacht's tanks and the Luftwaffe's fighters. Washington promised that if those tanks can't move, the war shortens. So the 8th and 9th Air Forces sent hundreds of Liberators from Benghazi, Libya, across the Mediterranean and up into the throat of Axis industry. Operation Tidal Wave. Red doesn't care what they called it at briefing. Right now, he just wants to keep his airplane in one piece. You can feel the heat inside the fuselage. The bombardier, Lieutenant Halverson, is yelling numbers. Stand by, bombs. Away, as he releases tons of explosives into a snake's nest of pipes, tanks, and cracking towers. The blast kicks the B-24 upward like a hand under the belly. Bombs clear, climb. Climb, but climb to where? To his left, another Liberator. He can't see the tail number through the black smoke, takes a hit under the wing root. For a moment, it keeps flying steady, proud, stubborn. Then it folds, like someone pressed a hand down on the fuselage and snapped it in half. It cartwheels into the refinery and vanishes in flame. The interphone goes quiet for half a beat. Everyone saw it. Red swallows. Keep it together. We're not dying here. The navigator is already off map. The formation is scattered. They trained for high-altitude precision. They are now in a knife fight with flak towers. Every second is improvisation. And this is the quiet part of the war the audience never sees. The cockpit is shaking. Gauges are quivering in their mounts. The smell is metal and fuel and cordite, and this 30-ton aircraft, this Liberator, is more than just aluminum. It is oxygen tanks and hydraulic lines and plexiglass and flesh and sweat and hope. It is a crew that trained together. It is a machine built in pieces across the United States and somehow stitched together into something that can cross continents and come home again. If it comes home. 2's gone, 3's hit 4 is trailing fire, the co-pilot says, scanning out his side window. We're losing the whole element. Red doesn't answer. His jaw is locked hard enough to ache. He knows the mission numbers. He was in the briefing hut this morning when the colonel said very calmly that expected loss rates would be at least 30%. Maybe higher. Maybe half. Imagine looking at the man sitting across from you at breakfast and knowing one of you is not landing tonight. That math reaches all the way back to the United States. Because in 1943, the United States Army Air Forces are burning bombers faster than they can train men to fly them. These planes are not museum pieces. They are ammunition. And they are being used like ammunition. Navigator Red says, voice low and even in his throat. Get me a heading for Benghazi. I don't care how, just give me something. There's a pause. Papers rustle. The bomber banks shallow left wing, trembling. Fuel pours somewhere, atomizing in the slipstream. Stand by, the navigator mutters. Stand by. Red thinks just for a heartbeat of home. Of Michigan. of the flat green farmland outside Detroit, where his uncle used to say you could smell corn pollen in late summer. Where the Ford Motor Company promised something that sounded like a fantasy, a factory that could turn out a 4-engine heavy bomber like it was building a sedan. 1 an hour, they said. 1 an hour. At the time, every pilot laughed. You don't build a long-range strategic bomber the way you build a Model T. Airplanes are hand-fit rivet by rivet, skin panel by skin panel. They are fussy, temperamental, precise. They take time. They take patience. They take craftsmen. But out here over Romania, that promise doesn't sound like fantasy anymore. It sounds like survival. Because for every bomber that falls into the oil fields below and vanishes in that rolling orange fire, something in America has to answer with another. And if the United States can answer faster than Germany can shoot, that's how wars turn. The navigator finally calls out a heading. The Liberator banks toward open sky. Behind them, Ploiești burns. Late 1940. Ypsilanti Township, Michigan. It doesn't look like the future of strategic bombing. It looks like farmland, cornfields, drainage ditches, a 2-lane road. The ground is still soft enough in places that you can leave heel marks. Charles E. Sorensen, cast iron, Charlie Ford's hard, blunt production genius, stands out there in a heavy coat, hands jammed in his pockets, looking at the mud, and seeing something nobody else quite believes yet. He's got Henry Ford behind him, Edsel Ford beside him, and the United States government breathing down his neck. The Army Air Corps has a problem, and everyone in Detroit knows it. The B-24 Liberator, built by Consolidated Aircraft in San Diego, is a monster to assemble. The wing is a Davis airfoil, high aspect ratio, delicate to line up. The bomb bay. Bomb bay is unique twin bays divided by a narrow catwalk. The fuselage is a mix of subassemblies, turrets, control runs, electrical harnesses, hydraulics. This is not a simple airplane. But Washington wants thousands, not hundreds. Thousands. Sorensen listens while an officer from right field lays it out. We need range. We need payload. We need to hit Europe, North Africa, the oil, the rail, hubs, the submarines, all of it. And we need to do it from bases that aren't even built yet. The B-24 is how we get that reach. Ford can build it, the officer says. Ford knows how to build a lot of the same thing very fast. Henry Ford doesn't like being told what to do by the government. He's stubborn, anti-union, and famously hard to move. Edsel, his son, is softer, more diplomatic, already quietly working with the Roosevelt administration. Sorensen is neither soft nor diplomatic. He is a problem solver. Sorensen says, "How many do you want?" The officer doesn't blink. All of them. That's the birth moment. What happens next is not polite, not smooth, and not inevitable. It is force of will. Ford buys up land near the Willow Run Creek on the Washtenaw-Wayne County line. Over a square mile of farmland. People joke a bomber plant in a bean field. The Ford Realty Division clears houses, levels ground, reroutes roads. Surveyors move through frost with tripods. Cement crews pour foundations in winter air so cold you can see it. By spring 1941, steel is going up. Not a workshop, a cathedral. Willow Run will become one of the largest factories under a single roof on Earth. Over a mile from one end to the other, with a final assembly line that literally turns a corner an L shape designed to squeeze maximum linear line length inside the footprint. Over 3.5 million square feet of floor. Sorensen does not intend to assemble airplanes. He intends to manufacture them. That difference is everything. Traditional aircraft production looks like this. A crew of specialists hand-builds a fuselage section. Another crew hand-builds a wing. They match drill, shave, refit, re-rivet. Each airplane is in a sense its own individual. No two are perfectly alike. Detroit looks at that and says, completely unacceptable. Detroit thinks in jigs, in fixtures, in gauges, in standard holes and standard fasteners and standard tolerances. Detroit thinks in conveyor motion and tack time, the rhythm of the line. Detroit thinks if you can't swap a part from plane A into plane B without remachining it, you are wasting my time. So Willow Run is designed like a weapon. Subassemblies aren't built, they're stamped, jigged, checked, and released into flow. Wings are produced in mirrored pairs using massive fixtures, so their geometry repeats aircraft after aircraft. Fuselage sections arrive with wiring harnesses already loomed and hydraulic lines already routed. Turrets, Emerson nose turrets, Sperry belly turrets rolled to the line as plug-in modules instead of delicate surgery. It is brutal, beautiful logic. Make the bomber behave like a car on a line. There is a problem, of course. Nobody has ever done this with something this complex. A B-24 Liberator has over 1 million parts if you count rivets. Its Pratt & Whitney R1830 twin Wasp engines each have hundreds of precision components. It carries oxygen systems, radio gear, Norden bomb sight assemblies, self-sealing fuel tanks, armored plates, de-icing boots, control cables that snake from cockpit yokes back to the tail. This isn't a Model A. And yet, day by day, Willow Run rises around that problem. Rail spurs are cut directly into the plant so raw material and engines can arrive by train and finished bombers can roll out to a test strip. Housing goes up nearby. The Willow Run bomber plant spawns an entire instant city of trailers. Barracks hastily built apartments for the influx of workers. Ypsilanti and Detroit bus routes are extended. Parking lots the size of airfields are paved because thousands of people will commute every day to a place that 6 months ago was literally corn. When the first partial assemblies arrive from Consolidated for pattern study, they expose the next fight. Nothing fits quite the same way twice. Hand-built tolerances meet Detroit's anger. Sorensen sends teams with clipboards and micrometers documenting every deviation, ruthlessly redesigning each step so it can be repeated by shift workers, not artisans. This is not romance. This is industrial war. And it is just getting started. It's 1943 now, and Willow Run is awake. The night shift whistles in at 11 p.m. Lunch pails, hair tied up in scarves, cigarettes, heavy boots on concrete. The air under the roof glows a dull sodium yellow, and the noise is alive. Drills, rivet guns, hoists, air compressors, shouted signals, the constant metallic heartbeat of production. 40,000 people will pass through this place. Not just men. Women, thousands of them, most of them new to heavy industry, many of them with husbands or brothers already overseas. Rosie the Riveter is not a poster here. She's in Bay 12 running a pneumatic rivet gun, putting skin panels on a wing root, then dragging a hand across her forehead to wipe away sweat and aluminum flakes. The line itself is a mile long. A literal mile. Sub-assemblies feed in like organs, waiting for a body. At Station 1, you're looking at a skeletal center fuselage section, ribs, spars, bulkheads, flooring. You can still see daylight between the longerons. Move 20 yards, and oxygen system lines are already going in. Electrical wiring looms. Coded, bundled, tagged are being snaked through the ribs by crews who were waitresses and farm girls a year ago, and now know which harness feeds the bomb release solenoids versus the turret motors. By Station 3, the nose section comes down from an overhead crane and mates to the fuselage with a hard metallic clack. Guns will live here. A bombardier will lie here, chin pressed to the Norden, watching flak walk its way up to him, one black puff at a time. Engines arrive already cowled, each Pratt & Whitney R1830 test run inspected, tagged. They slide onto nacelles with repeatable fixtures instead of hand-fitting. Propellers mount. Control cables tension. Hydraulics bleed. Sorensen walks the line with a stopwatch. That's not theater. That's control. He times every motion. How long does it take to fasten this panel, to torque this fitting, to route this cable? He is not timing to punish workers. He is timing to see where the line is choking. The goal is smooth flow. Because when the line flows smoothly, something insane begins to happen. You can stand at the head of the line and see an unfinished skeleton. You can stand at the tail of the line and see a war machine on its own landing gear bristling with 50 caliber Brownings in nose, tail, waist, top, turret, belly turret. Armor plates installed. Plexiglass blisters polished. Bomb racks fitted. Radio checked. By late 1943, Willow Run is turning out B-24Ds and then later variants at a pace that makes visiting Army officers whistle through their teeth. Dozens per week. Then more and more. The line is not perfect. Far from it. Early airplanes leaving Willow Run sometimes have to be reworked at modification centers in Tulsa or Dallas to meet evolving combat requirements. New turrets, different sights, extra armor. Sometimes weather shuts down part of the test strip. Sometimes labor disputes flare. Sometimes a rushed subassembly jams up an entire section of the floor. But the curve is brutal, and it points in one direction faster. Standardized jigs mean if a panel doesn't fit, the panel is wrong, not the airplane. Interchangeability means parts can be swapped without drama. The L-shaped line means aircraft literally curve through the plant, picking up organs like a living thing. The goal everyone keeps whispering, the legend that spreads through the Army Air Forces, across bases in North Africa, across muddy airfields in England, across briefing huts where young men stare at loss estimates, is a bomber an hour. One B-24 Liberator every 60 minutes. Think about that. You are Red Kovacs back from Ploiești, hands still shaking from flying a 60,000-pound machine through refinery fireballs. You watched a wingman fold in half. You wrote a letter to his mother because you don't trust anyone else to do it right. And someone from stateside tells you quietly that in Michigan there is a factory where the bombers never sleep. You don't know her name, but a woman in a polka dot headscarf just drilled and bucked 200 rivets on a section of wing that will carry you home from your next mission. You don't know his name, but a tool and die man from Dearborn just corrected a jig so the tail assembly that will save you from a FW-190 attack at your 6 o'clock will mount without shim work. You don't know their names, but 40,000 people you will never meet just turned open farmland into a tap, and every hour another 4-engine American Promise drops out of it and rolls toward the war. Near the far end of Willow Run, final inspection crews crawl over the finished Liberator like surgeons. Logbooks are filled out. Serial numbers are stenciled. Tires are checked. Fuel lines are pressure tested. Control surfaces are run through full travel while a crew chief stands outside, eyes narrowed, watching ailerons and rudder snap crisp and smooth. Then under its own power, the bomber taxis out of the plant and onto the strip. It smells like hot oil and new canvas. It is loud. It is alive. And it is already spoken for. Winter 1944, England. Rows of B-24s sit on steel mat runways in the damp cold of East Anglia tails, lined up in white frost. Some are still in factory paint, fresh olive drab and gray. Some already wear nose art in shaky hand-painted letters, jokes girlfriends' names, pin-ups, cartoons. Every one of them has a serial that traces back across the Atlantic through rail yards, through a test hop off a Michigan runway, and into that cornfield turned factory. The 8th Air Force looks different now than it did in 1942. It is bigger, meaner, more confident. Crews still die a lot, but they climb into their briefings now knowing they will not run out of airplanes. That changes how a man sits in his seat. When High Command decides to hit marshalling yards in Germany, synthetic oil plants in the Ruhr ball-bearing works, in Schweinfurt U-boat pens on the French coast, they can send hundreds of bombers at once. Not dozens. Hundreds. Waves of them. So many that German flak gunners talk about the sky going dark. That is Willow Run. You can draw a straight line from Sorensen's stopwatch on a factory floor in Michigan to Luftwaffe mechanics in late 1944 cannibalizing wrecked fighters because the Reich can't build engines fast enough. Because strategic bombing is not just bombs. It is pressure. Relentless industrial pressure. Willow Run feeds that pressure. Every time a Liberator limps home with a tail full of holes and sticks. The landing on 2 engines, someone in a leather jacket slaps the aluminum skin and mutters, "Thank you, baby." The crew chief takes notes. Field repairs start. And if that ship can't fly again, the squadron doesn't stand down. There is another B-24 coming in from supply. By mid-1944, the Willow Run plant is achieving rates that would have sounded like science fiction 3 years earlier. Roughly an hour per finished bomber rolling off final assembly at peak tempo day after day, shift after shift. That is not just quantity. That is tempo. Rhythm. Warfare by heartbeat. Germany can replace pilots sometimes. Germany can replace guns sometimes. Germany can repair runways sometimes. What Germany cannot match is a system that turns farmland into aluminum. Aluminum into wings, wings into air power, and air power into continuous force projection. That's the real terror in Berlin. Inside the Reich Air Ministry, they read intelligence reports about American industry and understand in private that they are not just fighting soldiers. They are fighting an economy that decided to go to war, and then did it at scale no empire had ever attempted. A bomber an hour is not about bragging rights for Detroit. A bomber an hour is about this when Lieutenant Frank Red Kovacs and his crew taxi out at dawn. For yet another mission into occupied Europe, they are not gambling the last airplane. They are part of a stream, and that stream is wide. Listen to the flight line, England 1944 engines coughing to life one after another. Deep radial thunder rolling across cold air, ground crews waving signal paddles, props biting mist. Watch them take off heavy one by one and assemble into formation over the coast. Black specks stitching themselves into a box of bombers so tight you could walk from wingtip to wingtip if you weren't terrified of dying. Now zoom out. Imagine that sky multiplied across the Channel, the Mediterranean, the Pacific later on. Imagine what it feels like as a German infantryman in France in late '44, to look up in broad daylight and realize the sky is American. That is Willow Run. Not the building, not the concrete. The idea. Mass production applied to strategic air power. Sorensen will go on to say years later that the hardest part wasn't the steel or the machines. It was convincing people that an airplane didn't have to be crafted. It could be built, repeated, made interchangeable, made inevitable. And in that inevitability lives the outcome of the air war. Because by 1945, the United States is no longer asking, "Can we build enough heavy bombers?" The United States is asking, "Where do you want them?" Willow Run started as mud in a cornfield. It ended as a turning point in global war.